Hello, I'm Paul Gates, and welcome to The Academics. I'm joined by my fellow panelists Dave Spiceland and Christine Trexler. Now, Appalachian Junior Tyler Harden will go over the topics that will be discussed today.
Hello, I'm Tyler Harden. Today on The Academics, the panel will discuss the current events affecting us globally, nationally, and locally here in the High Country. Today's topics are President Trump's tax return being leaked, how gun legislation can affect our Appalachian community, and Trumpcare.
Thank you, Tyler. Today on The Academics, we'll first take President Trump's tax returns being leaked. There's a few questions here. First, who leaked them? Why? What do they show? Who wants to start with that?
I heard something really interesting today. On the tax return itself, it said like client copy on it, which has actually been getting a lot of speculation. Who could have leaked it? Because it obviously wasn't the IRS, or maybe it was, but who knows? It's assumed that it's maybe someone close to Trump, or some have speculated that it was him who did it himself, which is really interesting. And who knows what it means? It was only 2 pages.
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, we're in the middle of our own tax returns at the moment. I looked at my 2015 tax returns last night, and it was 18 pages. I can only assume that Trump's full returns probably, this is a wild guess, but 50, 60, 75 pages. Who knows? And two pages don't really tell us much. Tells us that he, what his, adjusted income was, the amount of income tax he paid, most of which was alternative minimum tax, remember, which he has promised to repeal. And you take that away, it would leave his effective tax rate at about 4%. And with the AMT, makes his tax rate about 24%. But you can't get anything more than that out of 2 pages. Dave,
well, he did pay his taxes. That's one of the things we learned. I was intrigued with, of course, the question, who leaked them? And apparently there was, I forget his name, but somebody who has been a less than Trump supporter in the first place. And so he apparently leaked that to Rachel Maddow, who had it on her MSNBC show. What I find interesting and questionable, and I've heard it both ways, the leaker, whether it was the original leaker or the person who leaked it to Rachel Maddow, did they do anything illegal? I've heard that what Rachel Maddow did was not illegal in terms of publishing, but then Sean Spicer indicated that she did do something illegal. But I don't think. What do you think about that?
I agree with that. I don't think she did. I think the leak also went to a guy at the Washington Post, didn't it? The documents arrived at his mailbox
mysteriously,
too. If it were an IRS employee, why an 11-year-old tax return, and why just 2 pages? If you're gonna do something illegal, it would be illegal for the IRS to leak it. Might as well do the whole thing. If might as well hang for an orchard as an apple. So two pages from, again, 2005. That's cherry picking by somebody.
It's about 11 years ago.
Doesn't really show much. Yeah, why go back that far? If you're going to leak something, why not 2015 and the whole thing? I would think. But back to the idea of did the press do something illegal by publishing? I agree, Dave. I think the answer is no, unless they had reason to believe that it was released to them illegally, and they don't know where it came from.
Well, and apparently Rachel Maddow's gotten a lot of flack for going on for about 20 minutes initially about we have hot news, and I'm paraphrasing here, hot news. And then, from what I understand, in the process while she was leaking that, or disclosing it, that apparently President Trump went ahead and tweeted, "This is what the amounts were," which made it sort of a moot point in the first place. And MSNBC is not the only one, but hyping these stories to get the viewers. Apparently, her viewership was up that night, expecting something big, and my opinion, turned out to be kind of a bust.
I think Christine puts her finger on it too with this thing about the client copy. I mean, who has access to the client copy? The preparers and the client. It's not the one that goes to the IRS. Anything else on that, Christine?
I mean, I think you guys did a really good job covering it. I just thought it was interesting to even go forward with a 2-page thing. Like you said, it was hyped up a lot. I've never tuned into Maddow's show before, and I saw her tweet it on Twitter, and I immediately tuned in like 10 minutes before. I was like watching the countdown. I was like, what is this hot story? And I was watching her preamble go on, which I don't hate on that because I think it was necessary to put it in context. But then when we got down to it, she even said herself, well, there's a lot more to this story. Yeah, and now you just gave people just reason to kind of close it. Some people have tried to do that at least and say, well, he paid his taxes, case closed, which might be what was wanted to come from it.
That's about all we can take from it, is that year he paid a lot of money in taxes, $36 million.
Well, and it does bring up the question of leaking. Everybody leaks in Washington, and usually leaking is done to get someone's position out there. We have these trial balloons where you can leak something, and then if there's a negative reaction, you can say, well, I don't know who, disclosed that information. It's a surprise to me, and then they can, back off on it. So everybody does the leaking. Republicans, Democrats, news outlets do that, and especially with Twitter, you can tweet. Just like you said, you just saw the tweet, and then you wanted to see what the big deal was.
There's leaks and there's leaks. I mean, this is just one example that we were talking about. There's the speculation now is who's talking to who about the Russia investigation. On the House Investigation Committee. Are they, is Nunes speaking to somebody on the QT at the White House, and that's created its own furor. In addition to the fact, is there an investigation going on at all? And that's all speculation and all based on some leaks that we really don't know.
And from what I heard about Nunes, I'm not supporting what he did or whatever, but supposedly he met in the old executive office building, which is next door. Okay. I think it's called the Eisenhower building now. And that there was a computer there in somebody's office who was a whistleblower, that he was meeting surreptitiously with him because the story I heard was that computer will not do what a computer in the House will. Now, whether that's true, I don't know. But, I mean, isn't transparency nice when it's practiced?
When it's practiced, yes. Everything above board, we can hope, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, shall we turn to North Carolina and legislation to, and we're going to bring this right down to the campus level, legislation that might allow campus carry, licensed firearms holders to carry them on campus. Right now, the way the law stands is they're only allowed on campus locked in the trunk of your car. That was fought tooth and nail a couple of years ago. Every police chief, university police chief in the system said that's a really bad idea. Passed anyway, and now it's upping it a little bit more. So now it's people who are licensed can carry on their person. Good idea?
I don't know about it at all. The big issue with this is that there's no data that actually would suggest we would be safer with more guns on campus, or for the opposite. So what it's coming down to is people feeling safe. I don't feel safe knowing that anybody in my class could have a concealed weapon with them. I don't know if that's what going to university is about. I feel like you're not necessarily entitled to be carrying a firearm on campus. I don't believe it.
Is it a defensive weapon? I mean, the university promotes a lot, and it's a video shown to all kinds of departments on campus we've had. It's shown in our department. The Council of Chairs has gotten it, the Provost's Council. I've seen it many times in all those meetings. Actually, there are two videos. One is the active shooter, it's called, and the second one is called Shots Fired. The first one's a little bit longer than the second, but the university police are really promoting it, that everybody should see it, everybody should think about what do you do. Is this part of the answer that everybody should be carrying? Are you carrying, Dave?
No, not really. I have a cell phone with me, but that's about it. You know, I'm a great supporter of the Second Amendment. I believe that it was not just the militia that it was written for. That's my own personal interpretation of the Constitution. But people who carry weapons ought to go through some kind of training regardless. I like the idea of being in the classroom teaching and not having to worry about, you know, who's got a gun in here. But, you know, I'm not a big fan of gun-safe zones where you put these signs up that there are bad people. There are folks who want to do harm. And fortunately, there's not a lot of them, but there are people, like some of the shootings that we've had, that went to these gun-free zones knowing nobody's going to have a gun to where they could, you know, shoot me down. It's a very complex question.
Christine.
I mean, that you're hitting it right on the head. How are we going to be safer if people, a lot of people, myself included, are fearful when you see a shooting on the news? What if that happened here? How would we prevent this from happening? But what if somebody came in and someone in the classroom does have a concealed weapon? Are they really going to be able to, you know, what are the chances of that actually happening where it saves the day? And it's hard to say because you don't know what would happen in that situation. How would we be safe? And I don't see myself safer with more people on campus with guns.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. If we eliminated the gun-free zones, like you mentioned, Dave, you know, would this act as a deterrent if the bad people knew that somebody else might be armed? Would that act as just a general deterrent? And, you know, should shootings start, would that be effective in stopping the threat? Or stopping, you know, what has begun. I kind of picture myself in a classroom with 45 students. It's a fairly small room as these things go. You know, bullets fly, and in a room with that many people, that small, I don't know who's going to get hit.
Kind of a Wild West narrative.
It is kind of, yeah. And also too, I mean, say something starts, some citizen carrying a handgun, you know, running around trying to find the shooter or whatever, and the university police show up, see this guy with a handgun, who's the first one who's going to get shot? The student with the handgun.
It's true.
So, you know, there's no real way to communicate, you know, I'm the good guy, please don't shoot me.
Well, to get back to your question, though, you know, we've had in the communication department, somebody came, I think, a year ago and talked about what to do in terms
university
of...
police.
And I've talked to my classes, and I'm kind of hesitant to do so because I don't want to make people paranoid. But I have brought up occasionally, what would we do if we heard shots fired in the hallway? And generally, you shut the door. I mean, there's questions about, do I become the responsible individual? Do I keep somebody from not going outside the door? If they do, even if it's locked, would they compromise the classroom? There's just a whole lot of unanswered questions that I don't think we've completely, and I'm not blaming anybody, I'm just saying that it's a very complex issue.
Well, of course, you know, we can't make students stay in the room, even if we think that's the thing that we should do. Can't say nobody leaves, you know, and then they can head for the hills if they think that's appropriate. And it depends where you are, of course, at the time. Yeah. Are you in a classroom? Are you in your office? Are you here, you know, in the studio? You know, it's a different thing for every setting. It's hard. As long as we're on North Carolina, maybe let's just sort of newsflash that HB2 might be being repealed today. That's on the news this morning. Apparently, a compromise was perhaps hammered out last night in the Senate.
I was not expecting this to happen anytime soon, so I am kind of shocked, but I'm pleased that it could be on the table, though I have to learn more about what's actually being proposed, of course. But yeah, I think it's really shocking because obviously Governor Cooper and our state legislator didn't have the best relationship to start. So if a compromise could be made, that would be pretty...
And the first effort to repeal under Cooper failed, and that was just a couple of weeks ago. So somebody's been doing some quick work, I guess, to try to reach that. You think it had anything to do with the fact that the NCAA was thinking about taking North Carolina off the playoff list permanently?
That's the question I've got, was this done for the right reason, Or was this done for economic reasons? Was this done to cover somebody's good intentions? I mean, only they know. And again, this is a breaking story, as they say, as we record this. So we'll know more about it.
Yeah, well, today, apparently.
Yeah.
There's other parts too. Remember, if you remember, the original bill, or the original law, as passed, prohibited municipalities and counties from passing their own anti-discrimination clauses and so forth. Apparently that is still in, a prohibition until 2020. I read that this morning on a legislative update I get. And but whether that remains, whether that survives the final vote, we'll see.
And again, this came about because of what Charlotte had done,
Right.
where Charlotte passed, and it's been so long ago, and there was a sense of, was this transparent enough on their part? Had they communicated, what was involved here? So it wasn't like the legislature just said, well, let's go ahead and pass this anti-gender, transgender bill or whatever. I think it was something as a reaction, which is what most legislation is. It's not where, gee, what do we do today to pass a particular bill? So
Yeah, it was clearly in response to what
Yeah.
Charlotte had done, of course. Okay, question 3. The failure of Obamacare, is it now Trumpcare? I don't know. The Republicans ran against Obamacare for 7 years. 7 years, and came up with a real dog when they had that long to really craft something. What's that about? I mean, did Trump think it was going to be the force of his personality that passed the thing, or
He obviously thought it was in the bag. He ran on that specifically, and he said himself it would be easy. I laugh when I see his recent. What did he say? He's like, no one knew it would be this hard to do it. It's going to be easy. He said that during his campaign, and then, who knew healthcare is really complicated and you can't pass it overnight.
Apparently, everybody but him knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. What is that about? I mean, it smacked us of something slapped together in just the last couple of weeks, and then tweaks being made at the very last second to try to get it through. Finally, Ryan gives up, goes to the White House and says, "This is not going to work."
Well, Obamacare took, 6 months before it was finalized and without any Republican votes. And it was designed to where, after a while, the tentacles of, which is true for most legislation, to where it would be very difficult to just repeal it. And like I've said before, the Affordable Care Act is more than just health care. It has to do with student loans, has to do with putting menus on the calorie count on 1 million vending machines in the U.S. That's part of it. That has to be processed, I think, this year. So there's a whole lot more to the Affordable Care Act than affordable care. So that's taking, and the taxes that are, in there. Now, the conservatives were saying that this was just Trump or Obamacare warmed over. They weren't real wild about it. But this is typical for a lot of legislation. I agree that they had 7 years to come up with something, and it would have been nice if they had something to go. But Paul Ryan is learning what Nancy Pelosi had learned, that it's like herding cats to get people of your own party to do what you want them to do.
Yeah. Well, how about the major parts of the proposed legislation, though? I mean, it was the tax credits or subsidies, whatever you want to call them, were going to be less generous than under Obamacare. The 24 million people covered by Obamacare, was it 14 million were going to lose it the first year? Is this, it was the Freedom Caucus that really wanted to just scrap the whole thing, and they were just going to, do a scorched earth kind of approach. The establishment Republicans, did they see that the people most affected by repeal would be the lower income, rural, older white voters? Trump voters, in other words. Did they see that this was their people who was going to get punished by this? And of course, the worry probably is that they were going to be punished if they voted for it in 2018. So there's...
I know there had been quite a few town hall meetings with it. I would watch them televised, as the Republicans meeting with their constituents. And there was a lot of heat for them. People saying, you promised that we would not lose our health care. So maybe some people heard that their constituents were angry with them. Some people had even suggested at one point, if you were going to repeal and replace it with Trumpcare, it would just be better not to replace it at all. People had suggested that, just in terms of the numbers of who would be affected. So maybe they did listen to their constituents. Maybe it was something else. I don't know.
Well, apparently some of these meetings were not local people or not people in the district, but people who were shipped in to be able to, now that's the charge.
That's always been the charge for
I know,
everything, for the inauguration and everything else. I
Well,
mean,
apparently some of that happened.
That's a pretty common kind of justification or explanation.
But you're right, though, that a year and a half from now, when we've got elections, and it's like President Obama said, elections have consequences.
Yeah, yeah, they do.
But when I hear a statistic that, well, X number of people will not be covered, there are people who don't want to be covered, young people, like people in our audience here. I don't know, I'm not asking if you have health care or not, but there's a lot of people who are healthy, who are younger, who are in their 20s, who say, I don't want health care. But then, and I've heard from people who said that either because they couldn't afford it or because they didn't want it, who when they got their taxes processed, found out that they had that little fine to pay.
The individual mandate.
Which was part of the Supreme Court decision. You know, Justice Roberts wanted that to be called, you know, basically a tax, and President Obama swore up and down, your taxes will not go up if you make less than $200,000. That was not true. So.
But you know, the coverage problem, or people who don't want coverage. I mean, insurance really depends on everybody participating, and maybe, you know, young people aren't going to be chronically ill for the most part, but they're subject to broken legs and things too. And you know, when you don't have health care, where do you go for care? The most expensive place you can go for health care is the emergency room. And so, and who covers that for people who don't have coverage? Those of us who do, right?
Yeah.
And those of us who pay taxes.
Yeah.
So it's a hard way to approach that. And it's kind of like car insurance, you know, mandatory car insurance. We all have to have liability. You can't say, no, I don't want automobile liability insurance. If you do that, you don't get tags.
Well, that's a state-by-state basis, and there are some states to where, you know, the so-called no-fault issues or whatever, but.
Yeah, what you can do in some states is just put up a $50,000 bond to cover that. So we'll see what the redone Trumpcare is. It's going to have to be something. They're going to have to do something to make it work. Well, that's our time for today.
Are you serious?
It
It was
is.
fast today.
Time flies when we're having fun.
Thank you for tuning into The Academics. See you next week.